Hi, I'm Rick Anthony, and welcome to the Someone You Should Know podcast, the podcast that focuses on musicians, authors, and interesting people. We like to say we're making a difference one artist at a time. So sit back, have a cold one, and get ready to meet someone you should know. Welcome to the Someone You Should Know podcast, episode number 100. I have been very blessed to work with some amazing radio talent in my radio career. And some were just acquaintances, but there were a few that really struck a chord with me. Now, today's podcast guest is one of my dearest radio friends, and I couldn't think of a better person to be a guest on episode 100. Why, do you ask? Well, it was because he helped me come up with the name and concept of the Someone You Should Know program way back in the late 90s. Very talented and creative guy that I'm very lucky to call my dear friend. Will you please welcome Ron Stevens? Ron, welcome aboard.
Congratulations on 100 episodes. Unbelievable.
And you never thought it would last, right?
Yeah. What's funny is you're getting to the 100th now, and we started this in the late 90s?
Yeah, late. I was doing one every
take your time,
one every third month or something like that.
Well, now you're doing it much more frequently.
For those of you who don't know, I retired from the Air Force in 1998. I retired on a Friday, then immediately started work the following Monday with Ron. So I went from a blue suit with the Air Force to blue jeans with Ron at the All-Star Radio Network. And Ron and I worked together for 19 years, cranking out some incredible funny content for morning shows. And during that time frame, Ron helped me develop a couple of shows. Thank you so very much for doing so, Ron. Back in the Pits with Rick Anthony was dedicated to the National Hot Rod Association. And then the Someone You Should Know program was part of a radio feature called Network 15. Can you kind of explain how Network 15 came to be, Ron?
Well, this happened at a time when radio was going through changes. And in radio syndication, we would create a program for a station. And like television syndication, they would give us advertising time and trade for that program. And we got to a point where most radio stations were maxed out on what they called barter time, bartering radio advertising time for programs. So we tried to get creative and find a new way to sell programming. And we came up with Network 15 as a primarily weekend morning formatted show. So we would take 1 hour based on the programming we had. They would give us an hour on a Saturday or Sunday morning, which was unusual for a station to give up an entire hour versus give up, a 30-second commercial. Mm-hmm. But it was Saturday and Sunday mornings, early in the morning, sometimes 9 a.m., sometimes 7 a.m. And we took that hour and broke it down into 4 15-minute programs. And I went to Rick, Mr. Anthony, and said, would you like a 15-minute show that runs every week? In this case, I think we started with about 200 stations. We grew it to quite a network. And Rick took it on, and you did Tales from the Road.
Yeah.
Remember that?
Yeah.
I mean, that was my favorite, Tales from the Road. And then Someone You Should Know, I think, branched out of that. And the idea was there were a lot of interesting people out there worth talking to, worth meeting. Some you already know. Rick interviewed a lot of country stars, a lot of rock stars, celebrities of all walks of life.
Mm-hmm. It was fun. I really enjoyed the up and coming talents, because the rock stars were usually, they had peaked, hit rock bottom, and they were on their way back up and just couldn't get any radio play. Now,
by the time they got to you.
Yeah, by the time, they were really scraping the bottom of the barrel by the time they got to me. But St. Louisans will definitely know Ron Stevens and his wife, Joy Gridnick, because they were very instrumental in the beginnings of a legendary radio station in St. Louis called KC95. Ron, can you tell us a little bit about the beginnings of KC95 and your role and Joy's role? Okay, because this was something that was almost unheard of. I mean, you guys were kind of just doing it on the fly.
Well, that's the amazing thing about that radio station. When Joy and I came along in the early 70s, it was just evolving into the second generation of on-air personalities. It started primarily with AM radio station personalities getting older and growing older, the top 40 feel, and discovering what was called progressive rock radio at the time in 67, 68, 69. And by 70, a new owner came in, a new manager, Shelley Grafman, and he started hiring young kids right out of high school, including Joy, including me, with absolutely no experience in radio. None of us. We had an entire staff by 1970, 71, the entire staff, including Shelley Grafman, whose previous life was selling life insurance door to door. None of us had experience in this. So we were basically winging it. And Shelley was smart enough to find people who had a passion for that kind of music and a passion for working in a different kind of radio format and atmosphere, and winging it and creating our own thing, and gave us the autonomy to do that. Here it is, 55 years later, that station still exists. It's one of the few remaining true rock radio stations in the world.
Yeah, it is just amazing. As a matter of fact, last month we featured Richie Callison, and Richie had a song called Never Say Goodbye, which was featured in the documentary that Ron produced and directed called Never Say Goodbye, which is dedicated to the early beginnings of KSHE Radio. Let's talk about the documentary, Ron. It's absolutely fascinating.
Well, number one, I think it's great that you interviewed Richie Callison.
And he told me to tell you hello. Hello, Richie.
Shout out to Rich. Okay, so I had a bucket list item after retiring of producing a documentary. And I knew from my years of writing to write what you know about. Mm-hmm. So I took that on. I knew KSHE was KSHE was 48 years old at the time when I decided to do it. I knew the 50th anniversary was approaching rapidly. So I decided to do it. And I went to KSHE and said, I want to produce a documentary about those early years. I think there's a great story there waiting to be told. And I went to lunch with the general manager and the program director and the, I forget the other guy's title.
Creative director or something?
Yeah.
Or whatever.
And their immediate response, initial response to my proposal was, do you want us to pay for it? And to this day, I don't know if that meant, do you want us to pay for it? Or do you want us to pay for it? I'm not really sure why they were asking the question, but my response was, no, I'm going to own this. I'm going to do it without, I will have total control of it. I'm not asking you for permission. I'm asking for your support in terms of talking about it over the air. And they gave me 1,000% support. Mm-hmm. They said, whatever you need from us, you have it. And they trusted me to do a decent job with it, which wasn't difficult considering most of the personalities that the documentary was about were still alive at the time. And they're great storytellers. So all I had to do was aim the camera and point the microphone, and they took it from there. And then, of course, edit it to make sense of it.
Now, Ron, in the documentary, you talk about a lot of radio voices that were in the early days of KSHE Radio and stuff. Let's for the St. Louis, the kids that grew up in St. Louis and such, that were now adults and growing old. What were some of the voices that they heard in the early days of KSHE that's on the documentary?
Okay, well, everybody who was still alive, who was on the air in the early 70s, actually appeared in the documentary and told their stories. Mark Close, who's still there, of course. John Hewlett, who has been there 47 years now. I hired him when he was 19. Mark Close started when he was 18. Joy in the Morning started when she was 17. Bob Birch was, I believe, 20, as I was. Bob and I were the oldest two there. 20 years.
And neither one of you could buy beer.
But all these guys, Joe Mama Mason, we stopped at 1979. So guys like the guys from the 80s, mm-hmm. like J.C. Cole,
Favaz.
Part of the story, so they weren't in it. But everyone you remember growing up with in the 70s was in this documentary.
Wonderful. Tell you what, I'm going to include the trailer for it down in the show notes so you can check it out. And before we continue, I hope you're enjoying the podcast here. You can check us out online, Someoneyoushouldknowpodcast.com. There you're going to find the recent news, our archive of past episodes, and a whole lot more. By the way, if you're there, I invite you to leave a review. It kind of helps us out big time. And we're so blessed to be heard in cities around the world. I just check out the notes every once in a while of where we're being heard at. Recently, Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. Surrey, British Columbia, and even St. Peters, Missouri. Ron, I think you're familiar with St. Peters. Now we get back to our interview with Ron Stevens. Now, before Ron and I started working as boss and employee, Ron and I also worked together. Ron and Joy and I all worked together at K-Hits 96 in 1996. Ron and his wife Joy have been a radio team forever and ever and a comedy force to be reckoned with. I think you guys had 2 comedy albums. Is that right, Ron? I know one was Somewhere Over the Radio, right?
Yeah. Somewhere Over the Radio was our first comedy album. And the second one was called Retail Comedy at Wholesale Prices. They both, the first one came out in 79, the second one, I think, in 81.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, they're old, but yeah.
But the thing is, the two of you worked at some major markets. You worked in New York and Los Angeles. Can you take us through those days of working in the major markets?
Well, that was exciting. When we left Casey in St. Louis, we left because we had produced a comedy album, and all the record labels said, if you want to get a deal with a record label, you need to move to Los Angeles and suffer along with the rest of us. So we moved to L.A., and K-West out there, which was the progressive rock, they had KMET and KLOS and K-West, 3 progressive rock stations there. K-West hired us first, but we were writing for television within a couple of weeks of moving there. We started writing for WKRP in Cincinnati, the sitcom, but we became, because of that, we didn't work full-time in radio very long. It was just too long a day doing that. But we became guest hosts on 8 different radio stations, including KMET. KMET did a 1-hour special on us at one time.
Wonderful, wonderful.
So we kept our foot in radio, and we very quickly went into radio syndication, and ended up on over 700 radio stations.
Yeah, that's amazing. And in New York, you were at what, Hot 97?
Hot 97 in New York, which was a very different format for us. I mean, we were doing progressive rock all those years, and Hot 97 was a hot dance, almost hip hop.
Oh, geez, yeah.
Hip hop. We were their white Midwestern morning show.
Awesome. Now, you mentioned the fact that you started radio syndication all while you were doing that. The All-Star Radio Network formed, and for those of you who don't know what it's all about, they created some incredible content for radio morning shows. Now, if any DJs listening, you probably remember Daily Comedy Exclusive, Contest in a Can, The Polka Monster, Trixie, The Good Morning Fairy, Big Bob, and countless bits and fake commercials, including 2 of my favorites, Gargantua Mall and Blue Sky Airlines. Ron, what are some of your favorites do you remember working? I know that I came in 98, and I loved doing that because that's what I had done for one of your competitors, ACN, American Comedy Network. Yeah.
And everyone at American Comedy Network, they were all friends of ours because we were all basically doing the same thing. And we all realized early on that if one of us ended up in a market on Station A, Station B was going to want to compete with that, so the other one would get a deal. So we were all growing at the same pace and having a lot of fun. So I think some of my favorites, Rick, were the walk-in characters. We had various people doing these walk-in characters, like Big Bob. Yeah, that was a hilarious character. Jerry the Gopher, which was based on Trixie, which was Joy's character. We even had our kids, Keaton and Anina, doing characters. Anina did the boss's daughter.
Yeah,
she was like, I think, 8 or 9 years old.
She did Howard Messy too.
That's right.
Harold Messy.
Harold Messy.
Harold Messy. Yeah.
Yeah, I forgot about Harold Messy. Yeah.
Yeah.
So those were fun because the way they were designed, the character could walk in and the DJ could interact with the character. There was really no script. So the DJ was basically reacting to this person who came in and took over the room, basically, You
mentioned Keaton just a few minutes ago. The one thing I really loved actually was a phone call that you and Keaton were part of, and it was all about hunting rabbits. And Keaton goes, "I want to go hunt rabbits." He was only like maybe 3. Oh,
that's right. Keaton was probably 5 years old.
5,
and he talked like actually he was younger because he could barely talk.
Yeah.
3 talkative, but the words weren't. And our plane is running. Hey, come on, son. You and I are going to go hunting. Let's go out and let's kill some rabbit. How about it? And then he would just respond in his little boy's voice.
Yeah, me want to go hunt rabbit.
Yeah, right.
But it was supposed to be like a hunting trip in Michigan or something like that. It was so funny. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to feature a famous comedy bit that I know you probably heard, and you probably thought, okay, I've heard this before, but no, this is the actual original. A lot of people have taken credit for this, but it was actually Steven Zagreetnik that came up with this. Ron, was this fast food? Was that 1980? When did that come out?
That was 1979, I believe. I actually went to a Jack in the Box that day to order food, and had that experience of that muffled speaker, of the girl on the speaker trying to, communicate with me. And here, two human beings simply trying to play, one guy just trying to place an order of, cheeseburger and a large orange drink and fries. And they're not communicating. It's just not working out. And it turns out a lot of people have had that same experience. As a matter of fact, as a consequence of doing that bit, in addition, of course, to making money on the album sales, several times through the years, major fast food chains contacted us and saying, we're doing a radio commercial. Can we have permission to use your bit in the commercial? So they were aware that was an issue. Those 4 speaker systems, of course, it's improved considerably over the years. But to my surprise, that bit played all over Europe for 20 years.
I think Dr. Demento featured it, didn't he?
Well, Dr. Demento did, yeah. As a matter of fact, it showed up on a couple of his albums, but of course with permission. And I think we made more royalties on that bit through Dr. Demento than we did anywhere else.
All right, here it is, folks. This is called Fast Food from Steven Zagreetnik right here on the Someone You Should Know podcast.
A double cheeseburger, onion rings, and a large orange drink, please. Did you get my order? A double cheeseburger, onion rings, and a large orange drink. No, I want a cheeseburger, a double cheeseburger, onion rings, and a large orange drink. A cheeseburger. I want a, listen to me, shut up. A double cheeseburger. Say it, double cheeseburger. Double cheeseburger, right? Onion rings. Say it, onion rings. Onion rings and a large orange drink. Large orange drink. Drink. Say it, drink. I want a double cheeseburger, onion rings, and a large orange drink. Ah!
Fast Food, the original right there from Steven Zagreetnik right here on the Someone You Should Know podcast. By the way, I invite you to pick up something very, very funny that Ron has put out. This is probably, I can't think of when it came out, Ron, but True Radio Stories features Ron and Joy and a lot of our radio brothers and sisters, including me. And it's a fascinating book, Ron. When did you guys publish that? It's just a fascinating book.
I believe that came out in the 80s, and that was a consequence. Anytime we would go to radio personality gatherings, there were conventions in Los Angeles and in Las Vegas and in New York, and we would all get together, hundreds and hundreds of radio personalities, and compare notes and do seminars. And Joe and I spoke at many of these and conducted seminars, helping morning show personalities understand how to use humor effectively. And I realized that we always swap war stories, things, goofy things that happen to us while we're on the air. And I thought this could make such a great book. So we started writing them down. And when someone would tell us a story, we'd ask them, hey, can we put this? We want to make a book. Can we put it in the book? And they'd go, oh, yeah, sure. And of course, we gave them all credit. So these stories come from all over the world and all over the nation, mostly. There are some from other countries, but mostly from America. And you probably, if you had a copy of the book, you would probably recognize one or two of the names.
Yeah, quite a few. A lot of great stories, too, about radio stations that were actually originally funeral homes.
You should point out that True Radio Stories is still available.
Yeah, it's available on Amazon. Matter of fact, I'm going to include that down in the link. Just go down the link. I want everyone to get a couple hundred copies of that for Christmas. Christmas is coming. Christmas is coming. What a great gift for someone on the Christmas list. Get a couple hundred copies of True Radio Stories and count me in for 10%, Ron, okay?
So anyway.
With this being our 100th episode, I'm going to announce that sometime this fall, we're going to start a Patreon site. For a very small fee, you get a chance to see all the unedited videos of all the shows that we've done, plus every Tales from the Road moment from the first year and up to date and such. And with Tales from the Road, Ron, we always ask for, the famous road stories of I guess you'd call that Spinal Tap moment for musicians and such. But for radio brothers and sisters, I usually ask, what was the worst radio remote or promotion where things did not go as planned? I want you to tell the story about the Keishi free concert in Forest Park where you almost got arrested. Can you take us back to that day?
Yeah, that was, Forest Park here in St. Louis is 50% larger than Central Park in New York, and it's the same kind of park. It has a zoo, and it has museums, and it has a golf course, and it's a very popular park. And back in the 70s, in early 70s, when I first started at Keishi, we realized that there was a place in Forest Park, the Pavilion. It's called the World's Fair Pavilion. Of course, the 1904 World's Fair was held in Forest Park. And all the hippies would gather there every Sunday morning and bring the guitars and smoke their pot and sit around and listen to the music. And it was just a hangout place. So we decided to capitalize on that and put together what we called a kite fly every March or April, right around there, as the weather was changing and there was a breeze. And people would bring their kites and we would supply music. That was the idea anyway. So I contacted Blue Oyster Cult. And I thought this would be a great band to have there. Keishi gave them a lot of airplay. They were relatively new. And they agreed to come and play at the Pavilion for our what was going to be an annual Keishi Kite Fly. They came, the crowd showed up. There were hundreds of thousands of, I guess, people there, kids. I mean, we eventually had one that had 80,000 kids. Not this one, thank God. There was maybe 3,000 or 4,000 kids there. And the band is set up and ready to play. And I'm standing there, making sure everything's right. And I've got my clipboard in my hand. And that's why the cop taps on my shoulder from behind. There's a tap on my shoulder. He sees I'm the guy with the clipboard. I must be in charge. And I turn around. There's this police officer. And he says, I need to see your permit. I said, permit for what? He goes, you're going to have live music here. You need a permit from the city of St. Louis to do that. And I said, I didn't know we have to have a permit. And he goes, well, if that band plays one note, you go to jail. And I said, can I go on the mic to at least, tell these people that so, that they're not disappointed? I could let them down slowly or something. He goes, sure, go ahead. So I get on the mic and I go, okay, is everybody ready to rock and roll? Real loud and it's echoing and everyone's, yeah. And I turn around, the cop's giving me that stare of, getting the handcuffs out, ready to go. And I smile and I turn back to the audience and I said, well, listen, I screwed up. We're supposed to have a permit for the band to play. And I didn't know that and I didn't get a permit. And this police officer here, right when I said everybody starts booing. And I said, this police officer here says that if this band plays one note, I go to jail. They all start yelling, send him to jail! Send him to jail! And I started laughing, and they all laugh. And I said, well, okay, here's the thing. The band can't play, but you can come up and meet them personally and talk. So everybody starts coming up, and everything was fine. And I go back to the police officer, and he goes, oh, my God, how did you do that? I thought you were going to start a riot. I was ready to call more police in. I said, they're not going to do anything. They're all stoned.
He said, I should call in the bunco squad. Or whatever.
And everything was fine after that. The next year, I got a permit. By 1974, I think that was the year we had Rush and Charlie Daniels on the same ticket. And we had 80,000 kids show up.
And Charlie Daniels was staying at the Chase Plaza Hotel, and he couldn't even get from there to the venue because there were so many kids, right?
Yeah, Ted Habeck got on his motorcycle and went and picked. Well, he got to the entrance, and the police officer, we had walkie-talkies communicate with the police with 80,000 kids. You know, we were more prepared that year. In fact, we had 8 porta potties that year. That's how prepared we were. So that was one porta potty per 10,000 kids. We had it together. So they called us and said, there's this big fat guy with a beard, says he's part of the show and he wants to get up the stage, and we're not sure we should let him in. And we said, oh, that's Charlie Daniels. Yeah. Well, we can't get him through on a car or anything. So Ted took his motorcycle down there through the crowd.
Yeah.
And, put Charlie on the back of his motorcycle with his guitar and brought him through, and he's doing high fives at everybody as he's coming through.
Geez. Oh, that would have been great to see that, a photo of that. That's really cool, really cool. There's one other short story I want to share. This is when you were in New York, and you guys were, I believe, you had a stalker. You had a guy that was...
Mr. T.
Mr. T. Not.
Actually, he went just by T.
T. Yeah. Not the Mr. T from the A-Team, but T.
Yeah. No.
Apparently, he was a stalker of yours. And you and Joy were doing a remote from, I guess it was a restaurant or something like that.
It goes back to the day that Like a Virgin from Madonna came out. We were playing Madonna. A competing radio station, Z100, which was a pretty big station in town.
Scott Shannon.
They had the exclusive right to play it first. So they gave us the label gave us a beeped copy, a copy that has beeps every so often, and it's making it impossible to play, but we could preview it. And they said they would bring in a good copy the next morning, but not till after Z100 played it. Well, of course, we couldn't take that sitting down. So we actually went to a studio. This was the day before the release. Went to a studio with 2 people we used in Daily Comedy Exclusive who could mimic any voice. And we had the girl and produce music. The girl mimicked Madonna. And we reproduced the entire song.
Jeez.
But we put little hints in it. We added the Hot 97 in it, in the lyrics, and a few other things. So it wasn't totally exactly the same. And we started promoting that we were going to play the song starting at 6 a.m. and we were going to play it over and over and not play anything else. And so it was, a gimmick, right?
Yeah.
So we started playing it over and over and over, but we did the format like we would normally do it, but that was the only song we played. And we locked ourselves in the studio as part of the show and the gimmick so that the general manager couldn't come in and keep us from playing it. Well, we had the sound effects of him pounding on the door, trying to get in, and eventually breaking the door down with this guy named T, who wasn't right in his mind. He sends a letter that came the next day with an article in it. And the letter was to the general manager. The general manager brought us into us. Stuart Lane was his name. We call him Stubby Shady Lane. It's showing that this guy is threatening to kill him because of what he did to keep us from playing and doing what we want to do. He said, Ron and Joy must be heard. You cannot, keep them from doing what they want to do. I have killed before and I'll kill again. And the article was about a murder trial. He was tried for murder, and he did murder someone who came into his house and he shot him in the back, and he got away with it. He never went to jail. And he said, I got away with this before and I'll get away with it again.
Oh my.
Well, Stewart took it to the FBI, of course, because it was very frightening. And it turns out this guy was a cab driver, and he picked up my neighbor. Now, Stewart lived a block from me, So he was a cab driver in our neighborhood up in Westchester County, New York. And he had picked up my neighbor while this show was going on. And my neighbor, to take him to an airport, and my neighbor's in the back seat, and he starts talking to the driver, and the driver says, quiet, quiet. Ron and Joy must be heard. He's got us on the radio.
Oh,
this neighbor tells me this story. I go, oh my God, that's the guy who threatened my boss. So yeah, we were doing this live broadcast from Perkins Pancakes or IHOP. I think it was an IHOP.
Okay.
Because Joy, I was teasing Joy about her ability to cook pancakes, her inability to cook pancakes.
Mm-hmm.
So they said she can come over here and cook pancakes anytime she wants. So we took them up on it. We did our show from the IHOP over in New Jersey, and she's cooking pancakes, and we're talking to people in the audience. I'm going around, and I get to this one guy and says, "What's your name?" He goes, T. And I realized right then and there, that was him. T was there. Stuart Lane is listening. He immediately calls the FBI. They're sending guys out there. And T, he just wants a minute on the microphone. And I dare to give him, okay. And he takes the mic from me, and he starts doing this rap piece that was absolutely hilarious. The audience loves him. He's great. He's very entertaining. Gives the mic back to me and walks away. And we never saw him again.
Oh, dear God. That's amazing. That's amazing.
But those are the kinds of the radio stories. I don't think that one is in True Radio Stories. Those are the kinds of stories.
It's just amazing. Just amazing. And wow. Now, other projects that Ron and I have worked on together include Honest TL, which was a video magazine about St. Louis. We also had you and Joy interviewing a lot of local celebrities. That was also on videotape and such. Videotape, geez. I'm sorry. That was on YouTube. YouTube videotape, geez. How old are we, Ron? also
I think Honest
let's
TL is still
talk
there.
Let's talk reel to reel too. Yeah, Honest TL is still there. And we also did Hey Lou with Sherry Farmer as the hostess for a long time. We just had a lot of fun together. It was strange. I never felt working for you. I never felt like I was actually going to work. I felt like I was going to play because
we were always
having fun.
We were just doing stuff and having fun. I still do that. I still just enjoy doing what I want to do.
And that's just it. I mean, it felt like, okay, what other job am I going to go to work and have fun? I mean, all the things, all the fun things we did, all the crazy voices that I did, all these celebrities that I've interviewed. Leslie's new to this whole thing. I mean, we've only been together for 5 years now, and because I'd say I talked to him, I talked to her, and she goes, "What? You need to write a book?" And I said, "No, actually, I don't write." But she said, "Well, you need to do a podcast." Well, Ron knows I don't write because he used to edit all my stuff. Misplaced comma here and a quote wrong. But anyways, that's where the podcast came from, is because of all of the celebrities I've talked through the years, and the Someone You Should Know podcast just came to me. That's why I'm doing this podcast, is to keep me from asking for my old job back, Ron.
Well, but you just called it a job, and the truth is, I don't think you've ever had a job in your entire life.
Well, maybe Air Force, maybe Air Force outside of doing the broadcasting.
Oh, Rick, even in the Air Force, you were doing radio.
Yeah,
that's true. I mean, you were playing radio when you were a little kid, sitting on the toilet with your record player.
Absolutely.
How old were you when you first got that license plate? I am a DJ.
Oh gosh, yeah, that was back in the early '80s. Yeah.
There you go. I mean,
Image. I'll never forget. True story. I had a license plate that said I am a DJ, or I am a DJ. Okay, and my mom goes, "What's Imadaj?" I said, "Well, Mom, what do I do for a living?" She goes, "You talk on the radio." Mom, it's I am a DJ. She still didn't get it.
That's funny. Well, I got to tell you this, though. This has always been important to me, that, you've never really defined yourself by your occupation, even though you have a license that says I am a DJ. You've always been a unique person. You've always been a wonderful, friendly, warm, honest, loyal friend type person. And everyone has seen that in you. And that's unusual, because you had such a passion, and have always had a passion for what you do, but you've never let it really define you.
Oh, that's true. It's strange, Ron, when the ego started to get me. I guess this was about, I would air check every single show that I would do on the radio, and I would listen to it in the car, and I would blow a break or something like that, and then I would ruin my whole day. I got into a point where the ego was just getting to me. And then it's like I got a voice from God that said, well, don't make yourself the star, make everybody else the star. And I did that for like the last 10 years of my career. Everybody else was the star of my show. And I was just the guy that got to moderate the show. And
that's a great attitude.
yeah,
Great
and it is because, I'm so very blessed to have been doing this and so very blessed to have worked with you for 19 years. And you didn't fire me. I was going to say 20 years. Would I gotten a gold watch? I would have.
I won't name his name, but it was another guy fired twice.
Uh-huh.
And we're still friends.
Yeah.
So we'd still be friends.
Yeah, absolutely. Closing thoughts, Ron. Are you working on projects that we should know about?
Actually, no, it's not a podcast.
Or a project? You got to
daring to do this as a live show, but it's taking the concept of interviewing to a different level. It's called Life, Death, and Other Scary Topics. And that sounds like a podcast, doesn't it? But my first guest for this, and it'll be live on stage at the Westport Playhouse here in St. Louis.
Wonderful.
And it's being promoted by Casey because my first guest is John Hewlett, who I hired at Casey when he was 19. Yeah, the U-Man. And we're going to have a very serious conversation, the kind of conversation you have after you've been up all night and it's 2 a.m. and you're sitting by the campfire and there's nothing else to talk about except life and God and right and wrong and, all those things, those deep topics. We're going to go deep and hopefully make it entertaining as well.
That sounds fascinating. You're going to have to keep...
November 4th at Westport Playhouse here in St. Louis.
We'll go ahead and give you an update on that in our on the website, on the Someone You Should Know podcast website. We'll go ahead and put that in our recent news. So we'll include that as far as that goes. By the way, for those of you who'd never heard the name John Hewlett, if you've ever attended a St. Louis Cardinals game in St. Louis, the voice that you hear introducing the players, who does all the stadium announcements, that's John Hewlett. Not only does he work for Casey in the morning, he would go and work until late hours, depending on how late the game was.
I was amazing. Now, I don't know if you remember this, Rick, when we were had on STL and All-Star, it was during the All-Star radio years, up on the 3rd floor of my house.
Yeah.
All those offices up there. There was a knock at the front door. And I go down there, and it was like 10 a.m. And it was John Hewlett standing at my door. And I opened the door. I said, John, what are you doing here? And he looks at me and says, I was hoping you'd know. I said, what do you mean? He goes, I got here. I was told to come here, but I can't remember why. And I said, well, who told you? He goes, somebody at Casey. I don't remember. So it has something to do with Casey. He goes, oh, we have a commercial here that they need. Maybe it's that. So I give him the commercial and he says, thanks. And he leaves. And it turns out that's what it was.
Oh, geez.
Oh, I mean, the guy never sleeps, or should try it someday.
Wonderful, wonderful. Closing thoughts, Ron. What else should we know about you, All-Star Radio, Joy? What else?
Yeah, well, we miss you. And, Joy opened a restaurant called the Fountain on Locust. That was her bucket list thing, I guess. Ran it for 15 years and recently sold it. So we're retired now, and we're working harder than we ever have in our lives.
Isn't that weird? Yeah, you and I both. I retired in January, and I'm working harder than I ever have before. I mean, actually, I am working now.
Yeah. Wow.
Real
First
good.
time. First time in your life you're working.
Yeah, absolutely. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, for episode 100, I couldn't think of anyone better than my buddy, Ron Stevens. Ron, thanks so much for being on the podcast.
Thank you, and congratulations on 100 episodes.
Hi, this is Rick Anthony, thanking you again for listening to this episode of Someone You Should Know. Now, if you're an aspiring musician or an established musician that's looking for a little exposure, I invite you to drop us a line at someoneyoushouldknowpodcast@gmail.com. That's someoneyoushouldknowpodcast@gmail.com. Also, I invite you to tell a friend about the Someone You Should Know podcast. I thank you for tuning in this time, and I invite you to check us out next time on the Someone You Should Know podcast, because you never know who's going to show up. Until next time, remember, God loves you, and so do I.